For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Jill McCrae, and I'm one of Shirley's 7 children. 2 months ago, I told my mom that I would speak at her celebration. And then I found myself on Saturday, 2 days ago, asking my husband if he would speak for me, and then I would go shopping for him. And he laughed at me. So I then called Megan Saturday night, and I said to Megan, Meg, you could do such a better job. Would you please speak for me, or write it? Since you can't get here, write it, email to me, and I will get up and say your words. She didn't think that was a good idea. So in desperation, real desperation last night, I Googled how to write a eulogy. And when I went online, I found that none of them fit. I even Googled very specific ones, like how to write a eulogy if you're the daughter giving it for your mother. And all I can tell you is that for a mother like Shirley Sue Johnson, nothing even came close. I think I know why. I dare say it's because somehow Shirley was bigger, she took up more space, even though she was only an average-sized woman. But with her passion and her convictions in life, she seemed larger than anyone else I've ever known. So none of the scripted programs for lovely mothers everywhere fitted for my mom. So, having said that, I got to tell you that from the outset, the only way I could write this was deciding it was okay, that I could only possibly, perhaps, give a glimmer of what she was like, and that maybe from that glimmer, some of us who don't know her well will have an appreciation of just how extraordinary my mom really was. I want you to imagine a typical Christmas letter. A few of us have written those, and no doubt all of us have received one from time to time. You know how the letters read, regardless of who sends them. It's all about our family is doing exceptionally well, and each of our children are the best in their class. Oh, and husband or wife or both have received major promotions, and the extra million we now make, and after donating at least half of that to the worthiest charities, of course, we just returned from a delightful trip to Europe or Nepal or Asia. Now, honestly, I'm not trying to mock Christmas letters. We all enjoy them. My point is, the letters have a discernible pattern. Typically, they note the highlights that have occurred in a family during any given year, without any mention of the underbelly. You know, the parts that are real, the messy parts of family life. In many ways, my mother's life reads like the perfect quintessential Christmas letter. She was born August 13th, 1935, to Troy and Lena Tatum in a farmhouse in Dublin, Texas. She followed her brother Dwayne, and after she was born, her parents had 4 more children, Dwight, Pat, Ron, and Larry. My mother loved her childhood. We were weaned on stories of how hard her parents, my Mimi and Papa, worked for their family. Mom said, looking back, she knows they must have been really poor, but that she never realized it as a child because they always had what they needed. And besides, she told us she always found the time growing up to do what was truly important, to dream, to read, to play, to date, to be a cheerleader, all while skipping ahead in high school and graduating when she was 16 years old because she was wicked smart. Then she met my dad, Lewis Johnson, who was a lieutenant in the Army when she was 20 years old, and they married 3 months later. A month after their first wedding anniversary, Mom gave birth to Lynn while living in Nebraska. Ed and I followed when my parents were stationed in El Paso, Texas. We then moved to Germany, where Dave and Joe were born. 4 years later, once again stationed in El Paso, Pat came along. And finally, 15 years after the birth of her first child, Mom had her seventh and last child, Sassy, while living in what became one of my mother's favorite places on this planet, Germany. Also, I need to mention, because I'm noting the highlights, somehow during their moves and while raising 5 kids, they both earned their bachelor's degree, Dad in history and Mom in home economics. After Dad retired from the military and Sass started school, Mom used her college education and taught school for, I don't know, Dad, 20 plus, how many years? A lot of years. Other facts worthy of a Christmas letter would include that all 7 of their children hold a minimum of a bachelor's degree, and at least one, I know for sure, graduated summa cum laude. In addition, my parents have 26 grandchildren, with their 27th on the way. Go Dave and Jen. And 6 great-grandchildren. Ideal Christmas letter fodder. Poor young girl from small Texas town meets young, handsome Army officer. They marry and have 7 children while traveling the world together, and after 20 years of being an officer's wife, my mother becomes a teacher and enthralls 26 grandchildren. All of these highlights are factual, and they're amazing. The image most likely created is one of an educated, adventurous, capable woman. And she was all that. It's all true. But these same adjectives could apply to many women. None of these accomplishments begin to reveal who my mother was, or the numerous qualities that set her apart. I think it's because within the parameters of my mom's life, somehow she was able to define for herself what being an extraordinary wife, mother, Ami, teacher, or friend meant. She was not a cookie-cutter anything. For example, I told you Mom met Dad when she was 20, but I didn't tell you how they met. My mom's brother Dwayne and Dad were Army buddies, so Dwayne brought Dad home to spend the weekend at my grandparents' house. Legend has it that my Uncle Dwayne and his wife Jean repeatedly warned my dad to stay away from his sister, Shirley, prior to Dad's visit. Evidently, my mom had a reputation as a real heartbreaker. Anyway, my dad was asleep on the living room floor when Mom came home from a date. Not seeing him, or by way of introducing herself, Mom tripped over Dad. In response to the question apparently written on her face, he said, "You don't know me." I guess she knew all that she needed to know due to his Midwestern accent, because when she entered the bedroom she shared with her sister Pat, she immediately exclaimed, "What is that damn Yankee doing in the living room?" Shortly thereafter, Dad proposed and Mom accepted. But at some point during the month preceding the wedding, Mom got cold feet. She told us that while at North Texas University, between classes, she called her mom in order to cancel the wedding. But because no one answered the phone, she went ahead and married Dad. Clearly, God wasn't going to allow my mom's pre-wedding jitters to get in the way of what he had determined would be the ideal match for both of them. Only my dad can speak to what their marriage was really like, what held them together, why their bond was so incredibly tight, how they created such a seemingly impenetrable cocoon in which to grow children. Because I have to tell you, I grew up with such a sense of protection and love. I was weaned knowing we Johnsons were the most loved, most treasured children on earth. And because of how we were raised, I trust my children have that same security. But before leaving the subject of my parents' marriage, I have to share with you some of which I've already told my father. Even if I live to be 100 years old, which I'm not planning to do unless they really improve plastic surgery, I know I will never witness my dad's equal when it comes to caring for a sick wife. Dad, no one could have been more loving, more patient, more devoted, more tender than you were with Mom. You are forevermore my hero. Now I really must move on before Mom shouts down, "Louis, how do you get credit during my eulogy?" No, really, she knew and repeatedly told everyone how wonderful you were during all of this. What I can speak to with complete confidence is what my mom was like as a mother. What immediately comes to mind is a commercial. Those of you over the age of 40 may remember a dog food commercial for kennel ration. I know what you're thinking. Jill, are you crazy bringing up dog food commercials during her eulogy, especially when we all know how she feels about dogs? But hang with me on this one. The commercial's jingle went something like this. My dog's bigger than your dog. My dog's better than yours. My dog's bigger because he eats kennel ration. My dog's better than yours. Okay, you got it. When I was a kid, the jingle stuck in my head, but in my world, the jingle evolved and became, my mom's bigger than your mom, my mom's better than yours, my mom's better because she's the perfect mom, my mom's better than yours. I loved that song. I believed it then, and I believe it today. Don't be offended, but I do. Okay. My mom was magical, and not just because when we were children she would pull candy out of us and our cousins whenever we were together. Although the first time she demonstrated this particular form of magic, the candy she conjured from beneath my skin was one of those orange circus peanuts. Do you remember those orange circus? I remember I was kind of bummed because I wasn't a fan of orange peanuts. And it was one of the few candies I can remember not liking back then. Well, that and candy corn. But when she saw my expression, she explained to me that since it grew beneath the surface of my skin, it was made for me and by me, so I would like it. And I did. By the time Mom became on me to her grandchildren, she had perfected her magical art form and always managed to extract the really good kind of candy from them, and I might add, she exercised those magical powers much more often than when I was little. But I thought her greatest display of magic was when she went to the moon for me. This occurred when I was 5 or 6 years old. I vividly remember sitting in a sandbox when my mom came rushing to me to give me a brand new green plastic bucket and a shovel the color of sunshine. Now, a gift for no apparent reason was novel enough, but the really exciting part was when she told me she had just returned from the moon where she had found my present. She said she could only find me the perfect sandbox toy in the perfect colors on the moon. So that's where she'd been. I never doubted her until, well, I was probably a teenager. Next, when I was a few years older, Lynn and I decided to make dinner. Even though we were novice cooks, we were encouraged to make whatever we wished. So, because we wished for bean soup with pineapple chunks, and chocolate cake garnished with crushed Fritos. That's what we made. Just a few weeks ago, Lynn and I were laughing about that meal, and I said, you know, it still kind of sounds good to me. But I know why. Although I remember my first culinary attempt with clarity, what I remember most was my mom relishing every bite and continuously telling us how delicious this was. But truth be told, Mom would gratefully eat anything she didn't have to prepare. Growing up, we used to have rules during dinner time. Many of the usual ones like no elbows on the table, no talking with food in your mouth, you have to eat everything on your plate, and finally, we had to ask permission to be excused from the table when we were done. But we had one law that was only broken if one of us kids had lost our mind. The law was you could never criticize or in any way show dislike of the food set before you. For years, I assumed the rules in the law were instilled simply to promote good table manners. Later, much later, I began to suspect a hidden motive. For although my mom was a home ec major and the most gracious hostess I have ever known, and it was evidenced by the fact that most dinner times included at least 2, but usually more than 2 guests at our house, Shirley Johnson rarely cared about what she served for dinner. And believe me, I'll admit this even if no one else will. Some of those meals were hard to swallow. Some of you might be thinking to yourself, what's magical about not being a great cook? Or a few of you may have gone down that rabbit hole, remembering all those times you asked her, "What's for dinner, Mom?" and recalling that if she replied, "Lay over to catch meddlers," you knew we were in for another mystery meal. The reason our family loved dinner time and other people always wanted to be at our home for dinner was because they wanted to talk to Mom. You know, she was a gifted conversationalist. She was conversant on any subject, but she was exceptionally insightful and passionate about the well-being of children, especially her 7 and then her grandchildren, the crucial importance of family, especially ours, the call to focus on character and to lead lives with integrity and honor, especially us, the need to be well educated and the impact of good teachers, especially her, the declining welfare of the country, especially if Democrats were in control, and later in life, Jesus Christ, especially if you didn't know him. Children, family, character, politics, education, and God. These lightweight subjects are what animated my mother. She could and would speak brilliantly on all these topics through the years, but she devoted her life living for some. Before the term child advocate was ever coined, Shirley Johnson lived as one. Her instinct about how to create a wholesome environment to grow kids was nothing short of inspired. She ensured we were always protected and protecting one another. And to make sure we understood what protecting each other looked like, Mom had other laws that covered things like what my brothers were expected to do if one of them got into a fight with a non-Johnson. Under those circumstances, the law read that, well, if, for example, Joe was fighting and Dave happened to pass by, Dave must enter the fight assisting Joe, even if Joe started it, or even if he was fighting Dave's best friend. We also had laws concerning the treatment of our youngest siblings. For instance, no matter how annoying or bratty Sassy was. It was against the law to yell at her or hurt her feelings. And additionally, in my case, I wasn't allowed to lock her out of my bedroom, even though back then I was 12 years older than her. If we broke these laws, we knew our mother would find out, and though I've been telling you true, Shirley Johnson was an uber mom, no one wanted to face her wrath. She could be fierce, and not in a quiet, "I'm so disappointed in you" kind of way, but in a loud, "You'll do it because I said so" kind of way. Seriously, we all grew up internalizing our mother's supreme edicts: never mistreat a child, and always be there for your brothers and sisters. From the first law, how to treat children, how to protect them, and how to love them well, it became second nature for all of Shirley's kids. As for my mother's second highest value, all I can tell you is this. Throughout this last year, no family has been more supportive or loved one another more than we Johnsons, McCrays, LaForges, Moises, and Tatums around the woman whose life we celebrate today, my mom.